In today's video, we have the latest trade talk around the Montreal Canadiens, the Edmonton Oilers, Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Philadelphia Flyers. Plus, we have some more news on some PTOs, another signing, and some other news around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we do have a lot to cover today, a bit of news, some trade talk, and a few other items here of note around the NHL. First up, so I'm going to take a look back here on this day in hockey history. Back in 2006, we had the big signing of Rick DiPietro of the New York Islanders goaltender coming out of his entry-level contract. Fairly new general manager, Garth Snow, signed his massive deal, and it turned out to be a massive disaster for the Islanders. He signed a 15-year contract valued at $67.5 million. Of course, DiPietro was, a really high draft pick. He was a really, promising talent that came into the league. On his ELC, he didn't do too badly, but certainly, in my opinion, did not play well enough, justifying any kind of a super long-term deal. Of course, for newer fans or people that may not have a great memory, back then the 8-year contracts were not a thing. There was no limits at that point. So after we get into the salary cap era, of course, general managers start getting more creative along with agents on how can they manipulate the rules to get more deals done and to get more, better paying contracts and make it work for the cap and all that. And of course, stretching things out was becoming a real bad habit, which eventually got banned around the NHL, and it's not something they can do anymore, which is why we have the 7 and 8 year rules depending on if the player is staying with the existing club or changing teams. So deals like this is a big part of the reason why we've seen that change. But obviously, it wasn't too long. He didn't play for a long career. Of course, DiPietro battled a ton of injuries. Ended up, being bought out with many, many years remaining. He's actually going to be on the payroll due to that buyout until the end of the 29 seasons. Of course, we're only 2022 right now, so he still has 7 more years on that buyout where he'll be getting paid from the Islanders all the way until that point in time. Of course, like I said, I understand why they went to 15 years. It was all to get the average annual value down. But really, I guess they thought they had their franchise goaltender and wanted to lock him up long term. But anyways, it turned out to be a massive disaster, one of the worst contracts ever. Obviously ended up being a major buyout and a big story. And that happened on this day. The contract was signed back in 2006, so 16 years ago. Now, on to some other NHL news from today. We got some PTOs, another signing, and the signing to me is a really good one. The Avalanche have signed Avs Rodrigues to a 1-year deal valued at $2 million. He's, an undrafted guy who got into the league. He's battled to stay in the league for a while. Played with Buffalo, Pittsburgh. 29 years old now. Had a bit of a breakout year last year in Pittsburgh, scoring 19 goals in 43 points. He shattered most of his offensive output in all the different categories. You look like last year was certainly a career season for Rodrigues. It was surprising it took him this long into free agency to get something done, but he can play center, he can play wing, and after putting up those point totals last year, if he can come close to reproducing that for $2 million, that is a really good bargain. Now, it's hard to say if he'll be able to duplicate that again. You do see guys kind of have, off the radar kind of blip seasons like this where they can have a real good production, but it can be difficult to do it consistently. That's the trick. That's the difference between superstar players and some guys that struggle to stay in the league. I think he's had like 4 or 5 contracts now that have been 1-year deals. The guy's battled hard, got good character. So to me, after Kadri leaving, he's not going to replace Kadri by any means, but he's another player who can play wing or center in the middle 6 for them. Second or third line, give them some offense. And for this kind of value, I think it's a good deal for the Stanley Cup champions to try to repeat. So to me, this is a really solid signing here by Joe Sakic, Chris McFarland, and the Colorado Avalanche. Now, on to some other news regarding PTOs. We get some news out of Calgary. They're once again bringing back defenseman Michael Stone on a PTO. So we'll see if he can survive and get another short-term one-year deal, been playing a lot on one-year deals at league minimum for some time. At one point, he was even bought out by Calgary, then ended up re-signing later. The Flames and Stone have had this on-again, off-again relationship for quite some time, but I do know that Daryl Sutter does like him and what he brings to the team, what he brings to the table, so we'll see. Obviously, that blue line, though, is a lot deeper now than it was before, so it'll be interesting to see how they proceed. I wouldn't be completely shocked if they move another defenseman that might be making more money and bring in Stone on a 1 year, veteran, league minimum contract to be able to shave some money off the salary cap. So we'll see if they end up going down that kind of road. They're also bringing in veteran centerman Cody Eakin on a PTO. So we'll see if Cody Eakin can land a contract with Calgary. Again, remember too, sometimes these teams bring guys on PTOs and they know that they may not be able to make it work. They may not be able to sign them. But they do this for a variety of reasons. They want to create competition in camp, especially with younger players that have some veteran guys to kind of go toe-to-toe with for a roster spot. They also want to be able to have enough bodies with veteran players and to be able to fill preseason rosters, because a lot of the top players don't play a whole lot of those, so they need guys around for that as well. So there's a combination of reasons. Sometimes they obviously do want to see if they can find a deal to sign them as well, but it's not all about that all the time. Joe Thornton, we don't know what his plans are right now, but we can confirm that he's back in San Jose. He's been confirmed to be in the area. Obviously, I assume he probably still has a home there after living there for all those years. He has been spotted skating with local players in the early preseason skates here before training camp gets underway. At this point, we can't confirm anything about what his future plans are. The organization has not given him a role. He is not under contract. I know the Sharks writers that covering this have been doing some digging and trying to figure out if there's, what's going on. But at this point, he's just there, probably skating, keeping his options open. Maybe he hasn't fully decided what he's doing yet. But at this point, nothing has been confirmed. But he is in San Jose. And I guess the feeling is that he will end up doing something with the Sharks, but that's just speculation at its best right there. We don't know for sure. And in Dallas, now retired goaltender Ben Bishop, who of course had to retire due to injuries and finish his contract on long-term injury reserve, is now working with the Dallas Stars in a different capacity. He's going to remain with the organization and has become a player development coordinator. So obviously Ben Bishop will be especially good for working with a lot of the young goaltending talent. So nice to see him sticking around and offering what he can to the young players coming up through the ranks, trying to become future NHL players. Now, on to some trade talk and speculation here for today. I want to take a look at a report from Sam Carchidi for Flyers Hockey Now. Obviously, we've talked about a potential trade that was being offered this past offseason, but never materialized, and that was actually Pittsburgh, not Philadelphia. But he wonders if the Flyers might have been the team that the Penguins were talking to, and that's the Jason Zucker trade that we discussed on the channel back sometime in the past week or so. The news had come to light that there was conversations between the Pittsburgh Penguins and a few teams around the league trying to shed some salary cap. There was some trade talk around Zucker, but it was believed that for them to move the contract, they were being asked to give up a first-round pick. So they ended up rejecting the proposed offer and did not proceed. Now, of course, at one point, I've seen other writers suggest that they thought it might have been the Anaheim Ducks. Of course, that's not confirmed, and it doesn't matter too much who it was because ultimately it never happened. But it's sometimes nice to figure those things out if you can, or confirm things, because it could, what happened before, what conversations took place before, sometimes can lead to future developments and future trades or things that can materialize at a later date. We've seen that happen numerous times when you hear about a new NHL trade that just took place and you find out that they were actually discussing it for months, off and on, trying to figure out how it worked, make it work, and they had conversations maybe back in the draft. Things never, came together. They revisited it down the road, like things like that, right? So sometimes when you hear these conversations, you hear these rumors, it's nice to try to confirm what was being discussed. It's difficult at times, of course. But Sam Carchidi wonders if Philadelphia might have been that team for a couple of reasons. Obviously, they're a team that are looking to add more future assets. So certainly to get a first-round pick for taking on a contract. Now, you might ask, well, how could they possibly take Zucker on? Part of what they were having issues with this offseason themselves was salary cap problems and trying to move money too. But perhaps I think they might have had, they had teams that were willing to take James Van Riemsdyk, but they also wanted a first round pick. And I wonder if I guess the theory here is that maybe they would take Zucker from Pittsburgh to Philly, and then get the first round pick with it, but then use that first round pick to move James Van Riemsdyk. Van Riemsdyk makes more money than Zucker, and they would end up saving, anywhere from $1.5 million or more on the salary cap. So that's kind of the thought process behind it here. But of course, that never came together. Now, the connection there, in case you're wondering, is Chuck Fletcher. Chuck Fletcher, of course, used to be the general manager in Minnesota. That's where Jason Zucker was drafted and started his NHL career. So certainly a player he is quite familiar with, and obviously was, that's why Carchidi is speculating that he wonders if Fletcher might have been the guy that was trying to obtain him. Like I said, it wouldn't have been a huge thing for Philly, but it would have been a way for them to be able to basically swap Zucker for Van Riemsdyk and save some money in the process. But the Pittsburgh Penguins didn't want to pay the price. I guess there is, always a possibility. You got to wonder, too, if they did talk about a Zucker for Van Riemsdyk swap even. Maybe Philadelphia retains a little bit of money to even the money out. There'd be no cap implications either way if they did it that way, just to give each player a fresh start with a new organization. I don't know if that's something that came up, but there is some theories and wondering about that those two teams were actually talking. And interesting to see if they do happen to revisit later the Air Division rivals. It's rare you see trades amongst each other, but I wonder if one team is doing well and one is not doing so well, if that could be something that gets revisited, depending on how each player is doing, of course, as well. We'll have to wait and see down the road. Now, of course, the reports today out of the Edmonton Oilers organization. Of course, Ryan Rishaug was back at it today from working for TSN and giving us some information on the Edmonton Oilers. He confirms that they are looking to move out salary. And this is also recently confirmed in an article by The Athletic, in author Daniel Nugent-Bowman, who writes for the Oilers for The Athletic, confirming the same sort of thing, that the Oilers are looking to make cost-cutting moves. Now, according in the Athletic article, they speculate that the players most likely to be included in that would be Warren Foegele, Tyson Barrie, or Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, Ryan Rishaug feels Puljujarvi is probably the most likely. He doesn't think that Tyson Barrie is as likely. He wonders if they might want to hold off and wait on that, get through training camp into the season to see how this blue line looks like first and see how things are working out before they decide to make that kind of a trade. I know both Barrie and Puljujarvi have both been linked to the Montreal Canadiens before. There was some talk and speculation that those two teams may have had conversations, but I don't know how far they got. It was the talk originally started that the Canadiens were talking to the Oilers about Puljujarvi at the draft. Of course, nothing ever ended up happening. We can't say 100% of those talks did take place, but there was some speculation that they did have at least preliminary talks. Hard to say how serious things got. It may not have gotten too far in that case, but ultimately the Oilers now have two different reporters confirming that they want to shed some money. Just a matter about how they go about things. So Jesse Puljujarvi, even though he's now signed, appears to be the player that they would probably prefer the most to trade. Likely bringing in another type of forward if they can. Maybe somebody making less money just to give a different mix, different dynamic in the lineup. There's also a possibility, according to the Edmonton Oilers writers and reporters here, that they likely will bring in one or two forwards on a PTO. One of the rumored players in the mix there is Jake Virtanen, so we'll see about that. And Riley Nash is another name who might end up going there as well. They've had conversations as well with some of the other players we've seen sign PTOs in other cities, including Zach Aston-Reese, who just recently signed a PTO with the Maple Leafs. There was talk that the Oilers were very much in on him as well. If they're able to trade Puljujarvi, I do wonder if a guy they might look to might be a guy like Sonny Milano, who still is out there unsigned, one of the top players from last season that remains without a contract at this point. So we'll have to see where things go. But the Oilers definitely, Ken Holland looking to shed some money. And right now, all indications are that Jesse Puljujarvi is going to be the guy, or at least the preferred player on their end. Of course, depending on what the offers are in the trade conversations, it's difficult to say what actually takes place. But he is a guy that's on the block. Now in Montreal, of course, they had their charity golf tournament today, named Nick Suzuki captain to start the day off, which there is a dedicated video on that on the channel from earlier today if you haven't already had a chance to catch that, with my full thoughts and opinion on that move. He's the 31st captain in team history. Obviously a young player under long-term contract who's set up well to be a big player and a big role for the Canadiens now long-term. So we'll see how that works out, but certainly one thing we want to talk about today, a couple of things. We know there's been some speculation around the goaltending situation as of late. Many players spoke to the media today. Goaltender Jake Allen did speak and confirm that yes, he and the Canadiens and his agent have had conversations around a potential contract extension, but he wouldn't go into any further detail, which is not surprising. So he wants to leave that between the management team and the agent that represents him. So we'll see, but it sounds promising that they'll probably figure something out and get something done. I know when it comes to Carey Price, he was at the event, even though he's not going to be playing this season. He did show up and come to the event, which is nice to see. And they did confirm that even though he's not going to be able to play, that he's going to be still around the team a fair bit this season. They want his presence there, wants to be able to be around the guys, which is probably good for him and his teammates both, and be able to offer anything that he can in any kind of way for assistance, just to be a resource and bring all that experience around to help the guys out, especially, the goaltenders on the team as well. So Price is still going to be somebody you see around a little bit more. I think we'll see him a little bit more than what you saw with Shea Weber last year when he was pretty much non-existent. Ken Hughes was also asked about the possibility of trading the Carey Price contract, obviously to help get them out of long-term injury reserve. Of course, that would take shedding some other money as well. And he indicated right now that that's not in the plans. He said for right now, they still have some optimism that Carey Price might be able to play again someday. And if he can do that, they want him to do that in Montreal with the Habs uniform. So we'll see where that goes. I know right now there's not a lot of optimism about Carey Price making it back. I know considering how little he played last year and the fact that he's going to miss the entire season coming up, the longer you go, it's that much harder to make that comeback. And he's likely going to need another operation, another surgery to have any chance of making that happen. So we'll see how things go. It doesn't sound like Price is certainly ready to say, I'm done. And the Habs are not ready to say or accept that at the very least here yet either. So obviously Price is going to be around. They have no intentions, at least for the time being, to trade his contract. And we'll see what the future holds there. But another surprise, I guess you could say, that we did learn today, but this is from TV's Renaud Lavoie talking about Joel Edmondson. Apparently, Edmondson is getting a lot of interest from around the NHL. Now, it doesn't mean the Montreal Canadiens are out there actively trying to trade Joel Edmondson. They just named Edmondson and Brendan Gallagher the alternate captains for the coming season. So I certainly don't think it's something that they're looking to actively do. But Lavoie indicates that obviously the Montreal Canadiens, we know they're trying to move out a contract or two before the season starts. They would like to trim their roster down because they have more than enough NHL contracts, get a little bit more cap flexibility, and Edmondson's a name that's getting a lot of interest. Now, he doesn't feel that it's likely that they're going to pull the trigger, given the fact that they are a little bit thinner on the back end, not only with NHL caliber guys, but just experience and everything back there. Edmondson himself, didn't have a great year last year. He was dealing with a lot of stuff off the ice and personally, and I would think that there would be a much better chance that if they let him play out the season, and if he can be healthy and have a good year, that his trade value would be much higher around the deadline. Now, of course, he's not even in the final year of his contract. He still has another year left as well. So teams would be able to get a little bit more term when obtaining him if they were able to actually do that and make it happen. So we'll have to see. A lot's going to depend on how the season goes for Montreal. Edmondson did have an interesting comment when asked about the upcoming season and going through, I think the reporter used the word rebuild, and he said that rebuild, he said that was last year. Now they're coming in with the intention of making the playoffs. I know not too many people are predicting them to be a playoff team. I think a lot of people are predicting this rebuild to go deeper and longer before they're going to start coming out of it. It really hasn't been going for too long. So I think it's fair to say Edmondson's comments certainly surprised a few people. I would say I was as well. But we'll see. It's good that they're coming in with optimism, though, with the mindset that they can try to make the playoffs and that they can surprise people and all that. So you have to feel positive and you have to think that way to come in and be successful. So it doesn't make really a big surprise to me that he would feel that way or say that to reporters. However, like I said, though, the odds of him being traded in the near future, probably slim, but it's interesting to note that he's getting a lot of interest from around the league and could be a target near the NHL trade deadline next spring, as depending on the Montreal Canadiens are near the bottom of the standings again, like a lot of people predict they will be. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.